In today's episode, my employer stole my stuff, so I made him pay for it. The keys are in that box. NACL, 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 hey, goodbye. A Sparky's tale. So let's get started. My employer stole my stuff, so I made him pay for it. I hope this won't backfire, but I believe I did not break any law, so here it goes. Sorry for the long post. Some background first. Since I was a kid, I was fascinated in computers and electronics. During school, I had no social life. I just stayed at home and was learning stuff. I was going to generic high school that should prepare you for university without any specialization, but there were few people with same interests as me, and our IT teacher was really supportive of us. When I finished high school, I already had a job as a programmer and had a few years of experience in the field. I also was experienced with electronics and even worked on a few contracts for the factory in town, involving creating machines for them. Other engineers came up with an idea how the machine will work. My job was to put their motors, sensor, wire it up and write program for the PLC to control it. I moved to a big city and started university, so I lost my programming job in my city. I was going looking for a part-time job, while living of my parents' support. Things changed when my friend got an escape game voucher for 5 people for his birthday and took me with him. The escape game had cool magic stuff, like you placed objects in a shelf and all pictures in the room fall off the walls, etc. While we were there to solve puzzles, I was mostly interested in these magic things, making theories about how they made them and thinking how I would do it. When the game was over, I saw for a moment their technical room, and at this point I was like, I want to work here. I sent them my CV, and as I was overqualified for this job, I was accepted after first interview. I was young, naive and stupid, so they just used me. My hourly rate was after tax as equivalent of $8.50. To put it in comparison, cashier at big store here makes roughly $6.50 plus benefits. First few months were awesome. I was paid for doing my hobby and the owner loved me, as his previous tech guy, referred to as tech moron now on, was, compared to me, just dumb. I'm not bragging. I swear. He did not came up with almost any original design, he just found something on the internet and was skilled enough to read the schematics and somewhat copy it. But he had big gaps in his knowledge. Once he told me that I can't build a battery-operated circuit that will be powered while the battery is charging, as this would cause the battery to explode. When I told them about charging regulators and how it not an issue with his phone or laptop, he just told me I was hired to help him and to F***ck off. Over the time, Tech Moron started to realize that I'm just smarter than him, and his ego could not handle it, so he decided his only now from now on is to make my life a hell. For example, the owner tasked me with replicating device that they already have in one game, as he wanted to put it into another one. I spent week just by messaging Tech Moron asking him for the schematics and source code, calling him, and he just never replied. Then I decided to F***ck him. I came up with an improved design and built it. When I was shoving it at the next meeting to the owner, who was very happy with it, Tech Moron just yelled at me for not using his design and wasting time on reinventing wheel. After some time, the owner realized what was going on and hired another tech guy, Tech Senior from now on, but he cannot fire Tech Moron, as he had all important source codes and designs at his laptop, and because of bad contract, it was not property of the escape game company. Little did we know that in the future, he will not hand over most of the designs and codes, and we will end up rewriting that from scratch. The company was also franchising. We just took a game we already had running, made an exact copy, and installed it in another location. We then provided support while they were paying us license fees, usually a small percentage of their profits. The owner was a typical manager who thought 9 women can deliver a baby in a month. And it showed as the company grew. Eventually Tech Senior was made my boss as he had much more experience in electronics, while I was more oriented on programming and on-site support for game masters if something broke. We didn't give a F***ck about Tech Moron, as at this point, he just showed up once a month, did almost no work, criticized all we already did, and had working and went home. Things were going really well, so we hired few electronics student to help us. The building department, which was making props, like special wooden table that we could hide our magic into, also grew. Things were looking really good, until one meeting about new franchise client. The owner told us what he needs. We, tech guys, talked to props guys, went over all the requirements and told him we need 10 weeks for it, well 8, but we always accounted for shit going sideways, as this date will be on the contract. Usual stuff in healthy company. Next week, next meeting. He told us that the client does not want to wait, and he put 5 weeks in the contract. His reasoning was we are doing the same stuff as before and now have more people, so it will go faster. We worked hard. Like really hard. There were weeks when I just went home for 8 hours to take shower and sleep for a bit, then went back to the workshop to work on stuff. It was hard, but we managed to finish in time, and I got some sweet money in overtime. But this was a mistake. Now we showed him that what he wants is possible. So the next contract went over the exact same deadline shit. More overtime. I remember having almost no social life, just working the whole week, sometimes sleeping at the workshop, and being stressed as fuck. Then, every Friday I just went to a pub with a few friends, totally wasted myself to relieve the stress, and slept through the whole weekend. Then comes a Monday, and we start over. Eventually I went from I love this job to I don't give a f *ck, and I wasn't the only one. Our performance dropped and we started missing deadlines. Did the owner accounted for it in the contracts? No. Repetition makes perfection, this time you can do it faster was his reasoning. And he just kept signing more and more contracts, dumping the shit on us. I remember the one meeting when he asked us about status of Project D, as the deadline was next week. Well, we did not even started working on this, as we had our hands full with Project C, which was started later because we did not finish Projects A and B in time. This is how far it went. Deposits from new contracts were used to pay fines for old contracts. At this meeting I realized I just have enough. Of course our job was not only franchising. We had our own games that needed to be maintained, and we were doing that all the time alongside that franchising hell. What was the biggest issue with all games was the control software. It was shitload of simple-purpose scripts driving all the Raspberry Pis and Arduinos in the game, but it had one UI presented to the game master so he could control all the props in game, override them, etc. At least in theory. But oh boy, it was buggy like hell. Sometimes not working at all, sometimes you wanted to shine light on object to give the players a hint, but instead it opened doors to the next level, etc. It was no universal, simple requests required massive changes, lots of overrides were not implemented correctly. One day, the owner finally agreed to my demands and allowed me to rewrite all of that. It took me few months, but I created universal engine that could handle all the shit game designers were asking us to do, was easy to expand, had error protection and recovery tasks. Now, if one prop stopped responding, you just opened the debug page and clicked restart. This was a game changer, as previously the game master had to switch off the power and sometimes that was not possible during the game. And my biggest achievement, I created easy scripting language which was used to describe the game workflow. The game master now had a shitload of working controls and option to interrupt predefined tasks and change the flow, but that barely happened, as the game was now almost automatic, and he was there just to give hints. I was not comfortable running this software on the Raspberry Pi that was there for the previous control, and I wanted a better hardware for that. My request was always denied by the owner, but the games manager wanted the new software working ASAP. To this point, we were always just testing it from my laptop, so I decided to lend them few PC. Some time ago, friend from a big corporate pulled a shitload of Dell Optiplex workstations from eScrap. They were working fine, had Intel i5 CPU, 8 gigs of RAM, decent onboard graphics, DisplayPort, USB 3.0, fully working computer. You could buy them refurbished for about $200. The company just had no use for them and nobody wanted to go over selling them, so they just dumped them. I had stack of 20 of them at home, just collecting dust. I took few of them to my work, and the boss agreed we will settle it later, so I just emailed him list of all of my HW that was used in the games, 5 PCs, some Wi-Fi routers, old tables, some monitors and other stuff I had collected mostly from e-waste, fixed it, and had no use for it. Of course I did not told them I got that for free, and was expecting them to pay me for it. Fast forward, I was fed up with the franchising deadlines, and got few job offers that made me realize my real price, and that I was abused young kid in his 20s, working for almost nothing. But I was waiting. In the next month, my software was deployed in the remaining games. Tech Moron was out of the picture for few months now. Tech Senior had some programming knowledge, and was able to use my scripting language, but had very little understanding about the insides of the complex engine I wrote, which was now being developed for over a year. I had results, I was important, and I had demands. I scheduled meeting with the owner, where I wanted to present the list of all the wrong things, and what I want to do about it. It all came to a single argument: I'm not happy here, but you need me, so you will fix these issues and give me a raise, or I'm leaving. And I will stand my ground. Recruiter from a big IT company I wanted to work for messaged me on LinkedIn few weeks prior, and I already went on the interview, so I had an escape plan prepared. The future looked bright, and I was ready to make it happen. The day of the meeting came up. I was in a good mood until there was a nasty accident in the workshop. I don't want to post any details, as this would identify me in a second, but this even is important. I, being the youngest one here, not even responsible for the mess, was tasked with cleaning it up. I had an argument with the workshop manager about me being a programmer and not a radioactive waste cleaning lady, but in the end, I just broke and started cleaning. Halfway through it, almost vomiting from the smell, I just snapped. None of this would happen in a decent IT company. I went to my office, packed my stuff, and just sat there just playing games, waiting for the owner. When he showed up, I told him about all the issues. He argued at some, but when we got to the end, I just told him that today was the last straw, and that I'm leaving right now. I was employed as an independent contractor, so they could save some money on taxes, and my contract had nothing about my time there. I just told him that I will send him download link for all the files I have, as the contract stated that they are owned by the company. He begged me to stay for one more month, as they were behind on many deadlines. I just said I will think about it and left. On my way home, I called the recruiter and told him I accept the job and can start next month. Next day, I just made a big archive of about 150 gigabytes of files, backups, etc. that I had, uploaded it to my server and emailed the link to the owner and Tech Senior. I then spent the next 2 weeks in bed, watching Netflix and ignoring calls. For the last week, I showed up to help clear up some things, hand over my projects, asked about the computers and other stuff I lent them. He told they will pay for it, and then left. I was lucky as hell. The next month, the corona happened, and month later, they were forced to close all games by government, making their income go almost zero overnight. This I believe was the reason they never paid me for my stuff, even I repeatedly asked until I got tired of it. Time went by until few weeks ago, when I saw the Tech Senior was looking for a new job. I messaged him and we talked. He told me that they survived by doing private events for companies until they could open again month ago. All the other tech guys except him were let go, but he managed. Until he got into an argument with the owner. He did not told me much details, the owner wanted something either impossible or expensive as fuck. When he presented cheap alternative, the owner just snapped dead and fired him on the spot. He tried to reason with him about not firing him until he can teach his successor and find a new job in the meantime, but he was fired on spot. Week later, I got a call from the owner. He hired the younger tech guys he fired during COVID and wanted me to come and answer their questions, mostly about the engine I wrote. I agreed, but as we were planning the meeting, I was suspecting he just wants me to do it for free. When I brought up the hourly rate, he just told me we will solve that later, hang up and never called again. The day of the meeting came, I was waiting in my car outside the workshop, waiting if he will call where am I, but he did not. Few days later, I parked next to warehouse where all the games were held, with a Yagi antenna in my car. Surprise surprise, the Wi-Fi routers I lent them were still there, with the password unchanged. I connected to the Wi-Fi and poked around the network. All the PCs that I lent them to run the software on were still there, still running the Linux server I installed there, and looking at the logs, they were still used to control the games. I wrote a script that runs on boot, rolls a dice, and then deleted the whole drive. I was connected to MY Wi-Fi router, making changes to MY computer, formatting MY drives. Then I drove away. Few days ago, I got a call. Apparently, when the Monday shift came in, the control system for one of the game was not responding, the browser was showing timeout. They decided to reset power for the whole rack where all the PCs were multiple times, hoping it would start up, because turning it off and on again always works. When they decided to stop trying, they find out that all 8 games were dead. The new old tech guys figured out that the drives probably died, but had no knowledge about my system, so they could not set it up. When I asked about Tech Senior, the owner made some excuse about him quitting and not wanting to work for them anymore. I told him I was happy to help. In the end, this used to be my dream job. But I now work for a big company, I don't have much time, and it's expensive. I can come over to set it up, but my hourly rate now is $150. He talked me down to $100, which was still about twice as much as I make now. When I arrived, I checked the PCs, pulled out the email I sent him a year ago, and told him that these serial numbers match these on the labels, and told him I'm happy to find my lost stuff, took first PC, and took it to my car. We had an argument. I told him that I'm either taking all that stuff, or he is paying me something over $2,400. He wanted to call police, but I had the proof this equipment was mine. He eventually agreed, and I got to work. All my software was still in the bit bucket, even with the few modifications Tech Senior managed to make, alongside with all the config file and scripts with the game workflow that Tech Senior was periodically modifying and backing up, so it was pretty easy job. I got it all working and then stayed for few more hours, explaining some stuff to the tech guys. I printed the invoice and left. Tired, but satisfied. Yesterday, a nice sum of about $3,600 landed in my bank account. From what they told me, all 8 games were dead for 3 days. Each game costs between $80 and $120, takes 1 hour to finish and half an hour is needed for preparation, so there are 12 slots every day, averaging on $9,600 income per day when fully booked. This is of course just the income, profit after paying all the rent, wages, electricity, consumables used in games, etc. is much lower, but I don't know how much. Before Corona, about 80% of slots was booked during week and 100% during weekends. I just like to think I made him lost 23,000, not counting the angry customers which were forced to reschedule dollars just because he was a jerk. If he paid me for my stuff or did not fire his only tech guy, none of this would have happened. The keys are in that box. First off, I would like to say this is my father's revenge and not mine. But it was one of his best. A little backstory to get you caught up. My father was a welder at a pulp and paper mill on maintenance with a union. There were around 500 people who worked here at the time. Mid to late 80s, on my dad's crew there was a man they called Squirrel because he would take anything small enough to carry and take it home. Some of the things were specialized tools made for a certain machine, and they would have to be ordered in again at the company's expense. I guess there wasn't much the mill could do because somehow the union backed him. It wasn't long before my father's tools started going missing. He knew where to look and found them in Squirrel's toolbox and some scattered on his workbench. Squirrel was an average-sized man. Around 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, but my father was a huge man standing at 6 feet 5 inches and around 250 pounds, so Squirrel didn't say a word. He was too scared to. My father reported this to the union rep and the main office and was told they will investigate. Squirrel was given a 1-week paid suspension while the investigation went on. They found many of the missing things in his locker, lunchbox, toolbox, etc. Somehow he got the union to back him again, and was allowed to come back to work at the end of his suspension. My father grabbed his mobile welder and went into Squirrel's area and welded together a giant metal box. He took everything he could identify as Squirrel's and put it in the box and welded a top on it. He said he used 5/8 stainless to make it out of. He then got the help of one of his work buddies to lift the box, and Dad welded it to the bottom of the I-beam on the ceiling, about 20 feet in the air. The day Squirrel came back, he was looking for all his things, but couldn't find it at all. He asked everyone he could, but no one said a word except, "I take care of my tools. Maybe you should take better care of yours." This went on for a couple of hours until Squirrel went into the main office to complain, saying someone stole everything of his. The shop steward and Squirrel walked into the maintenance shop to ask the people in there where his things were. Dad stood up and walked up close, and knowing him, he was towering over Squirrel, and said something along the lines of squirrels like to climb to store their stuff. "Are you sure you didn't climb the I-beam and put your stuff up there?" I guess the look of OF*CK on the shop steward's face was almost too good, but the look of pure horror on Squirrel's face was my dad's favorite part of this story. He would laugh just as hard at every telling when he got to this part. Squirrel went into his work area and looked up. He saw the box up there. He tried to get anyone's help to get it down, but everyone seemed to have important things to do and can't at the moment. Squirrel took a day and a half working alone to get his things from the box, and to remove the box from where it was welded. My father said not a thing ever went missing again, and Squirrel worked there another 10 years or more until the mill was shut down. I can say I believe him because one night staying at his place I got drunk and was thinking about going home. He went to the basement and made a little box and welded my keys in it. I got them back the next day. I miss my father and his stories. I hope this qualifies as pro. NACL, hey, goodbye. A Sparky's Tale. This is a bit of a read, hey. The title will make sense at some stage, I promise. I'll explain some stuff as we go, but as always, there's a glossary at the end. Some years ago I was working FIFO, fly in, fly out, at a mine. Leave the smallish town I was living in at the time, fly to the mine for 2 weeks, fly back home for 1 week. Rinse, repeat. As a dual trade Sparky/Instro, it was big hours and lots of beer tickets. Sparky/Instro electrician/instrumentation electrician. With all the fat stacks of bills I was being paid, I decided to buy a fixer-upper house that I could work on during my weeks off, with a view to selling at some stage. My construction industry mates would help, on occasion, for beer and barbecue. This is the way. The house was an old wooden single-story, 4-bed, 1.5 bath affair, on a half-acre, 2000 SQM/21780 SQF, with a big shed. Seriously, the shed was a big 4-bay job with power and water. And a John Deere ride-on mower for all the green shit. It had come up at an estate sale, the previous owners having been there for over 25 years. It needed the usual paint and mending, a fair bit of modernization, a bit of renovation, but was overall a solid house in an established neighborhood. All the blocks around there were half-acre. The first day I was moving in, I hadn't been there for an hour, and had one of the neighbors visiting. There are 2 types of neighbors who come over within an hour. The "here is a casserole, welcome to the neighborhood" type, and the Bill and Ginny type. Bill and Ginny antagonists. Bill was a retired barrister, Ginny a retired surgeon. A barrister is a highly skilled specialist solicitor who wears a wig. A solicitor is a regular lawyer who doesn't wear a wig. I had to ask a barrister some questions regarding an upcoming court case once. Thought I'd just ring them up. 30 minutes on the phone cost me $500. Wigs are no joke. Anyway, Bill and Ginny came over with the "hello peasant, this is a quiet neighborhood yada yada" bullshit. They'd been at their house for over 20 years. I was courteous and respectful, explained that I would be in and out due to being a FIFO contractor, didn't party, and the only noise would be fixing up the house. Well, Bill and Jenny were most assuredly not impressed. I don't know if it was the contractor bit, or the fixing up the house bit, but I don't think their faces could have looked any more sour/horrified if I'd leant in and given them a big lick up the face. I received a legal brief on the noise laws, and repeated assertions that this was a quiet neighborhood. Bill was also kind enough to let me know that everyone around here has pride in their gardens/lawns, and it would be a shame if I were any different. F***ck Bill, okay, I get it. Bill has no chill. I let him wander off with his alpha attitude and went about moving in. Dave and Beck. Dave and Beck, from over the other fence, came over just on sunset with their teenaged kids, beers and pizza. Dave was a high school principal and Beck was a nurse. They asked how it went with Bill and Jenny, and we had a good laugh. Dave told me how Bill comes over and gives unsolicited gardening advice. Dave, Beck and their kids were tops. All through the first day I'd seen Bill pottering around in his garden. Garden isn't the right word though. Apart from the house, their half-acre was like the local botanical gardens. Gazebo, pool, pond and all. Dave told me how Bill bragged about his rare trees and flowers and shit. Can you tell I love gardening? Honestly, grass is just something you pull up to pave or concrete over. After the first week, I'd moved in, and had begun the plans for the work I wanted to do. With the title to the house had come a copy of the previous owner's application to build a deck off the rear and side of the house. Nice big deck. I stepped out the plans, decided that this big beautiful deck would do nicely, and had my people TM begin looking into whether the plans were still valid/needed updating. I'd also serviced the mower in my big shed and done the lawn, to the not-so-surreptitious scrutiny of Bill. Then it was off to the mine for 2 weeks. Each week off I'd catch up on sleep and work a bit. This went on for a few months until I got my first proper quarterly utility bill, power/water/etc. Now I could continue a habit I'd started years earlier. Just like everyone else does, when I'd moved in I recorded the power and water meter readings in my utilities diary. It's a good tool to monitor power/water usage. Comes in handy if you suspect a leak or power issues. Everyone has one, right? Now that I'd had a bill I could keep records. The issue unfolds. Month 5 I decided to replace the electrical switchboards in the house and big shed, fuse box/breaker panel/load center/distribution board/ I don't know where you live, and what you call it there. To do this, I killed the power at the front main switch at the meter box. This means my whole block would have no power. While changing out the switchboards, I'd also do a full test of the electrical cabling, outlets, etc. This testing was done, by law, prior to sale, but not by me. So of course I had to check it. 2 things were weird during this time. 1, the cable over to the shed tested not as expected. 2, Bill was watering some of his flower beds by hand. There are now some readers who have guessed what the underlying corpus delicti is in this tale. Some have probably figured out what the title means. Bill's whole garden, like mine, had an automatic irrigation system. At set times and days, the whole grounds would get watered by a pump and timers. This usually happened 3 times a week around sunset. His flower beds had misters, potted plants had drippers, and the lawn had the pop-up rotating chuck, brrrrrrr sprinklers. I wrote this out so you'd make the noise in your head. You're welcome. I'd never seen Bill water by hand with a hose. Weird. The shed circuit intimated that it either had a fault in the underground cable, or it had some electrical equipment connected, even though I'd unplugged everything for testing. So, the undergrounds then. I'd have to try and find the undergrounds and investigate. This would mean pulling them out and possibly replacing them, but that could wait for tomorrow. I'd just do the house switchboard that day. Next day, I borrowed a cable locator from a mate and traced the shed undergrounds, marking with my favorite pink paint. The shed undergrounds were about 1 m/3 feet inside my fence line, and were fed from the power meter box at the front of the property. About halfway between the house and shed I ran into more weird. It appeared that there was a branch off the underground shed power cable, heading into Bill's property. Looking over the fence, the first thing I could see in line with this branch was Bill's little hut that housed his pool pump / filter / irrigation controls / irrigation manifolds / valves. This hut was about 3 / 10 feet inside his fence line. Because this cable locator also located water pipes, I found that the shed water pipe also branched at this point. Things were less weird now. After marking the whole underground services trench, I packed up the gear and went about changing out the house switchboard. And had a nice think. The plan was formed. The next day I got my people TM to look into public records of when Bill's pool and my shed had been built. I also went and bought some cameras and a recorder. The last couple of days of the week I did a few things. Using surveyor's pegs hammered into the ground, I marked out where the big beautiful deck would be going. I didn't want anyone suspicious about why I'd marked the shed underground services trench. I put up the cameras. One facing down the side of the house that would capture the water and power meter at the front of the property. One facing my shed, which would inadvertently capture Bill's pool hut. Perfectly legal. I installed a mini power meter just for the shed circuit, so I could monitor power usage to the shed. I changed my irrigation timers to match Bill's, just in case. The last thing I did before heading back to the mine was to turn the shed power circuit off and the main water valve off. Of course, the meter readings went in my utilities diary. My grounds might not be watered for 2 weeks, but sometimes you gotta break some eggs. And everything was that smug green shade anyway. It could do with being taken down a peg. When I got home the next week off, I casually went over to the meters, and wouldn't you know it, the brand new power meter for the shed had numbers on it. Mainly because it was now turned on. The water meter had a higher reading and the water valve was turned on. So, big bold Bill, huh? Just leaving this stuff on for me to find. Next I checked the cameras. See Bill at his pool hut the day after I've left, looking at the irrigation system with puzzlement. See Bill walking off frame to appear on the other camera looking at the meters. See Bill turning the water and power on. See Bill going back to his place, checking the irrigation system. See the sprinklers come on. I'd also had a call while at the mine from my people TM telling me that Bill's pool and my shed had gone in around the same time 10 years ago. Bill. You silly wig-wearing wanker. Phase 2 of the plan included making the hole deeper for Bill. One day when he was out in the garden, I called over to him and asked if he'd seen anyone messing around with the power/water meters. The meters were at the front of the property, like they did back in the day, to make it easier for the meter readers from the utility companies. This meant that kinda anyone could come and mess with them. Bill came over and said no. I made sure to stand in a particular spot at the fence, so this exchange was captured by the camera. When I left for the mine, I not only recorded the meter numbers and turned the power/water off, I put an out-of-service tag on the shed circuit, and another on the water valve. These were dated and I took photos. So now we can establish just how bold Bill was, because when I got home the tags were gone, and the power/water was on again. I again went through the asking over the fence shtick. Again Bill denied any scienter. 2 chances to own up. Okie dokie, phase 3. Just so everyone is caught up, Bill had been at his property for 20 YRS+. The pool and shed went in 10 years ago. The pool hut with the pump and filter and irrigation system went in at the same time. You could see that the hut had been designed to house all of it. Bill might have been knowingly stealing power and water for 10 years. He certainly had no problem stealing power and water off me. Fuck Bill and all his green shit. I visited a couple of mates to pick up some items and went to work. In the shed, I got the borrowed 200L/53 gal drum filled it with water and emptied a 20 kg/44 lbs bag of goodness into it. It took a while to stir it all in and dissolve. I set up the dosing pump for the drum, and ran a lead over to my irrigation system to power it and turn it on. At 2 a.m. with my headlamp on, feeling all Jason Bourne, I went and turned my water off. After running the taps in the house to remove the pressure, I put some plastic down near the power/water branch for the dirt, and very carefully dug a hole. Exposing the water line going over to Bill's place, I fixed a tapping saddle to the water pipe. Remember, this pipe over to Bill's place was coming off my water pipe. Onto the tapping saddle, I fitted the end of a length of small clear plastic tubing and filled in the hole. The grass fit back into place just nicely. The plastic tubing I ran along the fence to the shed, tucked into the grass, and attached the other end to the dosing pump. The delivery system was ready. After turning my water back on, I turned my taps on to repressurize the lines. Then I cleaned up, went to bed. Later that day, around midday, I went next door and knocked. One last chance, Bill. Ginny answered the door, and I asked if I could have a word with them both about their pool and irrigation water/power. Ginny knew. She paused for a heartbeat and said they didn't have anything to talk about. As she was closing the door, I said that if Bill wanted to come and see me, I'd be home. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this looks like it's going to be a bit of an extreme response. Here's what I'd put up with since I moved in. Bill or Ginny asking me to keep the noise of the power tools down when I was working during the day. I only ever started after 9 a.m. and finished before 5 p.m. Our houses were about 100 m/330 ft apart. I was disturbing their gazebo time during the day. Bill and or Ginny calling the police to my place for noise complaints when I had mates over helping. The worksite radio was low, and we were just being jocular, not rowdy. Dave and Beck had no issue and came over for the BBQs. Bill had one of my F***king trees cut down while I was at work because it was too close to his fence. Yeah, okay, frangipani flowers do get kinda everywhere, but still, it had been there for years and he could have asked. Bill tried to legally bully the local council into denying my big beautiful deck plans. The deck plans had again been approved by the local council. Let me say this again, Bill tried to F***ck with my deck. So, at about 5 p.m., Bill's irrigation turned on. And so did my dosing pump. Have you ever heard the term salting the earth? The bag I'd emptied into the 200 L/53 gal drum was pool salt. NaCl. When Bill's irrigation turned off, the drum was empty. It had pumped all the salt water into Bill's irrigation system. 2 a.m., I Jason Bourned the tubing out of the hole, sealed the tapping saddle, and packed up. The next morning I took my mate's drum and pumped back. At about 8 a.m., I started digging up the services trench, all the way from the meter box to the shed. With breaks it took the whole day. When I got to the branch that led into Bill and Ginny's place, I called them over to look at it. They denied any knowledge. I told them that's okay, I was going to replace the cable and conduit to the shed anyway, so I just cut the stuff going to their place. I ended up jumping the fence and digging, so I could rip the pipe and cable out of the ground on their side. A plumber mate came and helped fix my water pipe. Fallout. Bill's garden. When I was digging my trench the next morning, I could see it all, everything, wilting. If he'd gotten a heap of water on it right away the night before. Who knows? Some of his rare trees may have survived. But by 8 a.m. the salt had been doing its job for 13 hours. When he saw what was happening and figured out the cause, he connected his hose to the irrigation system and started watering. Everything turned yellow/brown. It took him months to get the plants that lived back to being healthy. He told the local horticultural society, of which he was the president, that the pool water had somehow gotten into the irrigation. Bill and Ginny the morning after, once he'd figured out what happened, they confronted me. I denied any knowledge, and when he started threatening legal action, I told him about the tags and video and utilities diary and pool/shed building documents. It drove him nuts not being able to do anything. He knew I did it. Thankfully, I had no more hassle from them. I sold the house 1 year after starting, as planned, to avoid higher taxes on the sale. I bought another house and started again. My people TM conveyancer. Like a human conveyor belt. They move paper from one place to another. Big beautiful deck, best deck ever. It went along the whole back of the house and halfway round one side. It was 5m/16 feet wide, roofed, and had a barbecue station and sinks built in. I still miss that deck. My grounds, I managed to not kill any of my plants or stupid grass. Thanks for watching.